Now with Lisa Ruth, the former CIA analyst, now with Lignet, and we'll be joined in just a little while by Bill Donohue of the Catholic League. But Lisa, what we are seeing in terms of this action by ISIS to go after those not only non-Muslims but Muslims who fail to adhere to their particular theology, and that may be putting it mildly. How real is the continued danger?
Oh, 100% real. You see, and they're very happy to display this. You go to social media and they've got videos up of mass executions, of blowing up not only churches but mosques, as you said. It's horrifying if you sit back and watch the social media, although I actually don't encourage you to, because some of it is really frightening. But there is a very clear effort. They want to wipe these groups off the face of the planet.
We are joined now by Bill Donohue, the president of the Catholic League, checking in with us from Newsmax, New York. Bill, we very much appreciate your time on this Monday morning. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, JD.
Bill, before we get to the issue of religious persecution, on Saturday, Bishop Blaise Cupich, named by Pope Francis as the new Archbishop of Chicago, replacing 77-year-old Francis Cardinal George as head of one of the most important dioceses in the United States. Your reaction to the appointment of the new cardinal?
Well, you know, the Catholic Church tends to be split along the pro-life and social justice lines. Now, obviously, there's some crossover there. There's no reason why you can't be pro-life and in favor of helping the poor and vice versa. Cupich is known more for the social justice end. I'm not so much concerned about him as I am the way it's interpreted by some people on the left. I'm talking about Catholic left-wingers whose interest in the unborn has been practically zero. They say they're interested in fighting poverty, but we know that people on the left, be they Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, or whoever, they tend to be the least likely to give to the poor. So quite frankly, I put my anchor with the pro-life people, proudly so, and I think this could be read as a sign which is not particularly auspicious.
Meantime, Bill, Pope Francis in Albania yesterday telling the crowd that gathered to hear him, quote, "To kill in the name of God is a grave sacrilege. To discriminate in the name of God is inhuman." He did not mention any particular group by name. Is the Pope taking the necessary steps to deal with religious persecution around the world?
I think so. Not just with this pope, but virtually all popes. They tend to eschew or avoid becoming too particular. They don't want to put the salt into the wound, so to speak. So everybody, I think, knows who he's talking about. He's talking about radical Islam. And we're not talking about a few people. There's always a few crackpot Catholics, Protestants, and Jews. We're talking about millions and millions of people who seem to have this appetite for violence, and that if everybody doesn't line up single file the way they want, including their own fellow Muslims, they're going to be killed. So I commend the Pope. He didn't have to do that. He could have talked about almost anything, climate change or something. Then I would have been disappointed. No, I commend him for speaking out about killing in the name of God, because we know that Christians are being killed in communist countries. That's what we would expect from them. But when people kill in the name of God, that's something perverse. And I commend the Pope for doing this, because everybody in their right mind knows that he's talking about these people who have hijacked Islam.
Lisa, let's bring you back in. We were just looking, as Bill was answering the question, we saw the footage of Pope Francis in Albania, open to a huge crowd. The security headaches for the people trying to protect the Pope must have been considerable during this trip to Albania.
Absolutely. And you know, we were talking about the difficulties here in New York. Can you imagine trying to be on the Pope's security detail, particularly when you have, as Mr. Donohue said, a group like ISIS who would be thrilled to create a problem here. And you have to look at, he is a man of the people. He wants to be out shaking hands, you know, kissing babies, that kind of thing. And he does create warmth and all that. But from a security standpoint, it's incredibly dangerous, particularly in a foreign country, particularly one that may not have the same level of security.
Now, looking back post 9/11, now over 13 years ago, we got the reports that the terror groups, Al-Qaeda back then, was looking at at New York, Washington, but also overseas at Paris and Rome. The talk is that Rome still very much remains on the ISIS target list.
Absolutely. That is, again, not a surprise at all when you look at what we were talking about before. Big splash, big impact. And I still go back to Margaret Thatcher saying, you know, the media provides them with the oxygen they need to survive. If something was to happen in Rome, I mean, can you imagine the amount of coverage it would get? Which is really the problem with the terrorist attack in general. This is a very surefire way to get more international attention, more followers, more adherents, and it is very dangerous for Rome.
Bill, I would imagine that Pope Francis will continue to speak out, and obviously he has discussed what he calls religious perversion that you just commented on. What about the Christians in Iraq? Do you have any update on what is happening to the Christian community there?
All I can tell you is that I have some association with Chaldeans who have come to this country, and they've told me some stories which are horrifying. Not altogether different, I would say, though, from what you've been hearing. Listen, Christians are being destroyed. That's the purpose of this. See, in the communist countries, they want totalitarianism, and the church is regarded as a threat to their own power. It's not dissimilar in the Middle East. The church is regarded as a threat to the power of Islam, because in both cases, they want everybody to think single-mindedly according to their own dictates. So one might be religious or to some extent, and the other professedly atheistic. But what's at stake here is mass murder done for an ideology. And the ideology of Islam, radical Islam, and communism actually have more in common than what people would seem to give notice to.
And Bill, as you lay out the similarities there, at least in terms of creating conflict with the church, I know you're a man of prayer. I know we're not supposed to worry scripturally, but what keeps you awake at night?
Well, you know, every morning you get up and what do you hear? Here in New York, I woke up to the news about killings all over New York City. And then the next subject is killings in the Middle East. The Pew Research Center said something like 3/4 of the nations of the world today, Christians are being persecuted. It's in Africa, it's in the Middle East, it's in North Korea, it's in China. I mean, I guess Christianity has such a message that is so threatening to these people that they want to kill us all. Look, there's some good news. When you've got Sunni Saudi Arabia and Shiite Iran, while I trust neither of them, they themselves realize that ISIS is not just another terror group. These are fanatics beyond anything we've seen in a long, long time. And I'm somewhat optimistic that if you get enough people on board who have nothing else in common, maybe we can crush these people, and they need to be crushed.
And that evokes the old saying in the Middle East, Bill, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. We'll
Right.
put that in quotes. Lisa, back to religious persecution, specifically the Yazidis. They're on Mount Sinjar. Anything to add to what they've confronted there?
What we're hearing is that the situation does remain very much the same. They're on Mount Sinjar. It's a holding pattern, for lack of any other term. But they also know that they could be under attack at any second. There really is a situation of isolation. You're seeing the footage here of really the barren situation they live in. And I don't think there's a whole lot of hope. Everybody's just crossing their fingers that they'll have an opportunity to leave. But for right now, they're living in a very difficult situation.
Bill, about a minute remains. It was a couple of weeks ago, if memory serves, Pope Francis was very clear that taking up arms in defense of essentially the defenseless is the moral thing to do, especially when it comes to persecution of people of faith.
Well, that's right. There is what's called the just war doctrine, going back to St. Augustine, and this certainly meets the test. You have to exhaust all diplomatic, nonviolent means. There has to be the likely possibility that you're going to have improved the situation. It's got to be proportionate in its response. But the idea that you can dialogue with these barbarians is absolute silly talk. The only way you can stop them to bring about the peace is to meet them with weapons. I hate to say it, but that's exactly what we're faced with.
Bill Donohue, we appreciate your perspective there from Newsmax New York as president of the Catholic League. And Lisa Ruth, our analyst from LigNet, thank you very much for your insights as always. Again, a reminder to catch up on intelligence information. Go to lignet.com to offer your comments on what we've been talking about this morning.
Thank you so much.
Take good care. Why don't you tweet me your remarks at Newsmax TV, #America's Forum. There's also newsmaxtv.com/comments.